welcome back to the Toolbox Plugin series. Today we're going to make an RGB Vertex material that's going to take in Vertex data from our reference mesh and then allow us to use that to decide where colors are going to go. So our objectives are obviously we got to have to create a reference model within Blender that has Vertex data that we can work with. And then we're also going to need to create a 3-color mask material using Vertex data. Now, I like to use this in my prototyping because that gives me some extra options for playing around with different um, colors and feels for stuff. It's also something as far as a technique that you could incorporate into more complex materials to give you some more options. One of the examples I talk about towards the end of the tutorial is, like say I have a character or an object and I want to make it dynamic where, um, like this portion of it can be tinted, by the player, as a preference or a setting. You could use basically the same idea and then just expand that out. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, we're in Blender. As you can see, I've made a mesh here that I can import into Unreal. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to explain what we're trying to get out of this mesh for those of you that are familiar with Blender. And then after that, I will recreate this for those that are not as familiar with Blender. So for those of you that are planning on skipping ahead, all you really need to get out of this to continue on with the tutorial is a mesh that has our red, green, and blue Vertex Paint in enough faces that you can kind of tell where things are. It doesn't really matter what it looks like. We're just using the color channels to decide where we want to put textures and colors through the shader. So it is important when you're setting up your assets, both this one and then any assets you create using this method, that your Vertex Paint colors have the green or the opposite two channels zeroed out and the channel you're looking for set to a hard one. You don't want them to be you don't want to pick random stuff like this because you're going to end up getting odd results. So like I said, you want that zeroed out, maxed out. So that's all you really need. So feel free to make your own model and then import it into Unreal. I'm going to go ahead and create another version of this for everybody else. Okay, so if you're still hanging out, let's go ahead and get started here. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a mesh. We're going to add a cube, so Control A to add a cube. And then I want that to sit on the floor when this exports out. The origin point is going to dictate where it's going to sit. So I want to set that origin point from the middle of the geometry to that bottom face. Now, all I got to do that is set my origin point to the 3D cursor because it's still at 0, 0, 0. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude this out to give me those 3 sections. I'm just going to go ahead and do it by 2 by 2. So 2, and then extrude out again, 2. And I didn't extrude that out correctly. So E for extrude. I'll set that to 2. There we go. And then I'm going to grab these 2 edge loops here with the Shift Alt and then Control B to bevel them. And then I want to give it, I don't know, like a 0.1. All these numbers are totally up to you. It doesn't really matter. While I still have those selected, I'm going to hit Alt E and extrude along normals, and then I can kind of recess this a bit. -0.1. And then that gives me my basic shape. And I didn't do it on this one, but I'm going to do it on this, or on the first one. On the second one here, I think I'm going to go ahead and, just for making myself happy, I'm going to recess that. So 0.1. I 0.1. Okay. So now I've got that set up. That's the geometry that I'm going to use for it. Now I want to set up my materials. Now, one of the cool things about doing this is these channels, if we use that material, it's one material, but it gets 3 different colors or textures it can use. So you can, really play around with that. So for this one, what I want to do is, because I personally want to have a like a non um, 3 color texture here and here. So I'll probably just put like a gray box in there just so it looks very different. So I'm gonna end up wanting 2 materials on this. So I'm gonna give it 1, 2, and then new material, new material. And so I can visualize this as I'm deciding where I want my materials to be. I'm gonna give them a color. So I'll use nodes. So I'm gonna do like a green and a blue. Doesn't matter what color it is, it's not coming over into Unreal that way. And then if I go up here to my viewport settings and go to material, it'll show me where the materials are selected. So you can see the first material, it overrides pretty much everything. So we want to pick the second material and then pick the faces that we want to be the second material. So in this case, I'm going to use the second material to be the non RGB material. So that way, like it's the first one, the one that we're working with is going to be up here first. Okay, and then I can pick that material, that green material I made there, and assign. And then now I have that figured out where I want the materials to lay. So that's squared away. Now I can do my vertex colors. So I'm going to switch my viewport settings back to vertex. And then I am going to pick my vertex paint. Now, if you've never looked into vertex painting, basically each point, each vertex in your model, like this and all the faces, they have data in there that decide as far as the color. And we're setting that, and then we're using that on the other end to act as like a mask for what we want to do. So that's really what we're doing here. So like if I pick faces and then select, I can select the faces I want to do. So like I'm going to start at the top here. And I think I'm going to do this edge right here. So I've got that all selected. And then I go to paint, and then I pick my color. And just like I was saying before, you want to zero out the color channels you don't want any data, you don't want in there, and then pick the channel you do. So I'm going to start with red because I want to go kind of in order, red, green, blue. And then I go back to select, and I select the faces that I want my blue channel or green channel to be on. Go back to paint, zero out the red, bump the green, Shift K to apply all. Okay. And then hit the faces again for our last set of faces. I pick a color. The last one's going to be blue. So we zero out the green and the red. And we set the blue to 1. Shift K. And that's it. That's all you have to do in order to set that up. Now, before we export, though, we're going to want to make a few little changes just to make sure we don't get any extra errors coming into Unreal. One of our, the errors you'll pick up is shading. So like it'll say that it has, no smoothing groups. To fix that is really easy. I can click Shade Smooth. Now we don't want this to be shaded smooth on the other end, but what we can do is we go over to our, I think it's object properties, data properties, that's it. And then go to normals and auto smooth. That'll clean that up because it uses that degree as a limiter as far as what we want to be, like where we want things to be smooth and where we don't. So like, like for example, to add, I'll add like an icosphere over here. So you see when it's all flat, it's all, each of the faces is shaded flat. But now if I shade smooth, I can also add my auto smooth here and then extrude that out. And then you'll notice this, because it's greater than the 30-degree limit, it's going to end up giving a nice solid hard line, and everything else is nice and smooth there. So that's basically what we're doing with the auto smooth. I really like auto smooth. I do it on pretty much everything. So anyway, by doing that, now we will have smoothing groups, so you won't get an error doing that. The next thing you're going to want to make sure you do is make sure your UVs are set. This can really upset Unreal when you import if your UVs are messed up. Since we aren't applying textures or anything to this, I'm just going to go ahead and hit UV in Smart UV Project and just let it, unwrap that way. And what that's going to do is that's going to take all of the UVs and flatten them out, put them over here nice and neat. And that will get you where you need to go. So the last thing you're going to want to do is name it. So SM is generally the prefix for static mesh, RGB, and ref. So it's an RGB reference. And then we can export that file, export FBX. And then I already have my settings set up here in my presets. I got that set up here, my UE4 setup. But if you're curious about export settings, it seems like that comes up a lot. What I would have selected, especially for like this, most things really, limit to selected objects, so then it's only going to export what you've got selected. Armature, so if you're doing skeletal mesh, that'll be in there. And then mesh, which is the mesh itself, you want that. Your transforms, keep your scales. If you're working in 1 meter, you're good. Leave that there. And then as far as your forward, negative Y forward, up is Z up. Then for your geometry down here, you want to have your smoothing groups to face. There are other ways to import, but this works for me, especially for this. And then your armature, if you were doing a skeletal mesh, you want to do that. And then you want to, if you ever are doing a skeletal mesh, make sure you don't have the add leaf bones, because that's going to add a bone to the end. That'll come into play more when we do the reference for the UE4 man, where we take the mannequin from Unreal, bring it into Blender, and then modify it and bring it back. So less of a thing now, but something for the future. So yep, go ahead and export that, and then we should be good for importing it. So we'll go back to Unreal, and then I'll pull up and find that file, drag it over here. I'm going to put it in my assets folder. If you haven't created one, just add a folder named assets. Now it's important when you're doing the Vertex assets and bringing them in to go to advanced and Vertex color import options. So you want this to be set to replace, because what that's going to do is it's going to use the Vertex data, the color data from your mesh, rather than overwrite it with something else. And then down here, I don't want to create a material. I'm going to, or have it create a material on import. I'm going to create one and then apply it. So hit import all. And if everything went right, we should be good. Okay, yeah. So we have 2 material slots. The bottom one, I would just pick one of your gray box colors, throw that in there. And then the second one, we are going to make a material for. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and then come back to it. Okay, I'm back. I'm going to go ahead and continue on here. So if you're meeting back up after the jump ahead from the Blender, or if you just finished in your import, I would highly suggest you open up your asset and check it to make sure your Vertex colors are in there. So if you go to show Vertex colors, you will see you've got your red, green, and blue. If you don't see that, your material isn't going to work right, because it's using these colors, this data here, to pick what it's going to do. So without that, it won't work. So like I said, double check before you move forward. And then once you've done that, go down to materials and let's create a new material. Say mat underscore master, and then RGB. This is what I'm naming it. You can name it whatever makes you happy. So then the next thing that we want to do is set up our parameters. So we're going to start with our base color, and we're going to promote that to a parameter like we did before. Now we don't want this connected directly over there, so I'm just going to go ahead and break the links. So, and I want to change this from base color. I'm going to name it red base color. And then I'm going to put that in the group red. And I am going to give it kind of a red color, just so that way when you're testing, you can see that's what it's supposed to be applied to. It's applied in the right spot. And then I will duplicate this and then change it to green. Change the color to a green color and change the group to green. And then duplicate it again. Now I'm going to do blue. And then change the group to blue as well. Once you have the groups in, we'll be able to pick those for the next set of values. So now we've got our colors picked. Now we need to work them together using the mesh. So we need to get the data from the mesh. So we're going to get our vertex data. Vertex constant vertex color. So this node's going to pull the vertex data from the mesh. And then we want to use a linear interpolate to mask these out. So linear interpolate, lerp is awesome. Okay. And then I'm going to dump these into the A. And dump this whole thing out to the base color. So the way these work is it's going to use this alpha value to blend between the two. So A is what would be at a default value of 0, and B would be a value of 1. So what we can do is, because we know our red channel is 1, we put this into that alpha. That means this will spit out everything that is red on our mesh. And then we can continue to do the same thing for the other colors. So you put this down into the B and use your green channel as your alpha. Put this down into the B and use the blue channel as your alpha. And then all three of those together should work just fine. And then so that way we can see as we're working to visualize. If you go back to your assets and you pick your reference object and then pick the material we're working on, that RGB, master RGB, and then you see something did not go quite right. Okay, we'll work that out. So go back into our material and we can click select a asset. So select that asset, click this little button there, and then that'll work for that. Okay, so where did we go off the rails? Okay, so my red is going into the alpha for my first lerp. And oh, it's because I'm using the red channel rather than the whole thing. There you go. So huzzah. Now our colors are properly going where they're supposed to go. So again, take a good look at this. This can get a little confusing. I have every time I do this, it doesn't matter how many times I do it, I have a tendency to miss a pin or put something in the wrong spot. So I'm gonna walk right back over this just one more time. So your red color, the color that you want in your red channel, goes into the B pin of your first lerp, and you use the red channel of your vertex data as your alpha. And then for green, you want that into the B channel, and then you want to use your green data for your alpha. And then your blue, you're going to do the same thing one last time. Blue goes into the B pin, and then you're going to use your blue data for your alpha, and then dump all of that into your base color. So hopefully that was easy enough to follow. If it's not, like, I don't know, let me know in the comments. I can put on my website like just a screenshot of what it's supposed to look like, and that could be maybe that's the way to go. So this is my base color. Go ahead and comment. I'm going to comment that out. This is pretty simple, but once I start adding textures and doing more complicated stuff, this can get like huge. So you'll see here in a second that it kind of gets that way, even this way, or even with something small like this. All right, so we're gonna add a scalar because we still want to do our metallic and our roughness, because I'd like to be able to change those for each area there. So set my min and max, and then we'll do metallic. That in its correct group. Okay, and then I'll need to copy that a couple of times. Control C, Control V, Control V, Control V. Okay, and then set the stuff. So green, it's going to be group is going to be green and blue. Alrighty. And we're going to do the same thing we did before, although what we can do to make it like super easy, we just copy those lerps, drop those down there, copy our vertex data, drop them down here, and then just connect the pins. So first one's going to go into B using the alpha of red. Second one, green, is going to go into the second one's B, and using the green alpha. The blue is going into the B pin using the blue alpha. Okay. Double check, make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. Okay. Yep, looking good. I'll comment that out. It's here. And then dump that out into my metallic. Give it a color. All right, and then I can do that one more time. And I can actually take this whole thing and copy it and just change the parameter information. So that's what I'm going to do. And go roughness. Copy that just to make it easy. And then where it says metallic, I change that to roughness. I can dump this into my roughness. It's going to make it super shiny because I didn't change any of those values. But you can see as we go, I guess, as I change the values, which is nice. So I'm going to do that 0.85 I like. Just to set my defaults. And there it is. All three of my channels are squared away and my material is good. I can save that. And I can go back to my materials and create an instance of it. So the idea here is I can create assets. like this box here, and I can change on the fly their colors while only using like one material. So this would be like one. Well, this has got two materials because that extra border. But if it hadn't had that, it would be like one draw call. And so doing that, I can make like dynamic textures, or I can set up so like say like I've got a character and he's got different areas that I want to be able to make different colors. So like say he's got some pinstriping, or I don't know, like some sort of logo or something. I can put that on there using this technique. So I like it. It's something I use a lot when, like I said, when I'm doing prototyping. I'll like, set up some RGB values so then I can kind of play around with the colors on the fly. And, I like that a lot. So like if I make an instance of this and I open up its instance, you can see what I'm talking about here. So then, I've got it set where it's using our reference as the preview mesh. So, you can go in here and you can change, pretty much anything there, whatever you want it to be. I change the roughness, make it shinier, lighter, super shiny. So see, now that one's like super shiny, but the rest of them are still nice and flat. So it just gives me some more options when I'm setting stuff up. That pretty much gets it there. I mean, like from here, you would, if you make assets, you would just make sure that you have vertex data and you can play with it. So hopefully you found that interesting, and it added a new thing to add to your toolbox. I look forward to the next tutorial. I think in the next one, I'm going to take the mesh and use that as a body reference for height and positioning for like level design and things like that. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.